June 11th, Wednesday. Welcome everybody to today's committee hearing. We have other members that are en route. We will start out as whatever action we take will be a communication from the chair. So at this point in time, I think we have several items that are non-controversial that we should be able to just, roll through. So, Ms. Barclay, why don't we start out with item 5.
Good morning, Meg Barclay with the CLA's office. Item 5 is a communication from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to amending a conditional grant agreement with LCB Enterprises for the development of Tierra del Sol affordable housing development.
Okay, then on item 5, we'll adopt the CLA's report as a communique from the chair. And Mr. City Attorney, when we do get a quorum, I'd like to lump all of these together and then just take one vote if that is okay.
Yeah, just announce what all the different items
Okay,
together.
Item 6.
Item 6 is a report from the CRA and the City Administrative Officer relative to extending a professional services agreement with Burke, Williams, and Sorensen for labor and employment law services.
Burke Williams?
I know, huh?
The spa? So on item 6, we'll adopt the CAO report as a communique from the chair. Item 7.
Item 7 are reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to an agreement between the CRA and the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles.
Okay, we'll adopt the CLA report on that as a communique from the chair. That brings us to item 8.
Item 8 are reports from the CRA and the CAO relative to increasing the contract with Los Angeles Neighborhood Housing Services for the Council District 3 First-Time Homebuyers Program.
Okay, item 8, we'll adopt the CAO report as a communique from the chair. Item 9.
Item 9 is a report from the Los Angeles Housing Department and the CAO relative to tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Adams and Central mixed-use development project.
Okay, then on item 9, we'll adopt the CAO report. Brings us to item 10.
Item 10 are reports from the LAHD and the CAO relative to the issuance of tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Tres Lomas Garden Apartments.
We will adopt the CAO report as a communique from the chair, and I'd like to announce that I've been joined by my wingman, Councilmember Ed Reyes. That brings us to item 11.
Item 11 is a report from the LAHD relative to the submission of a grant renewal application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the Housing Opportunity for Persons with AIDS competitive grant program.
Okay, we will adopt the Housing Department's report as a communique from the chair on item 11. That brings us to item 12.
Item 12 are reports from the LAHD and the CAO relative to the issuance of tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Toberman Village project.
Okay, on item 12, we will adopt the CAO report. At this point in time, Mr. City Attorney, I'm going to have public comment. And so I'd like to bring up Roman. Come on up. I saw you earlier. Please, come on up.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Roman.
First of all, it's not public comment. It's request of disposition and determination of my case. So more than 10 my visits to City Hall, my written request, something like 10. Another were not enough to stop.
Hey, Roman, speak into the mic a little bit.
Oh, I am sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. Were not enough to stop Housing Assistance Section 8 office mockery of senior 74-plus-year-old disabled low-income victim of 1994 Northeast earthquake. Since February 7, official request for tenancy approval on address, which is here, where I live without housing assistance payment since February 15, and my 100% unlawful eviction on January 2nd from apartment where I got housing assistance payment before for 13 years and 8 months from Federal Emergency Management Agency through housing assistance. through Housing Authority of City of Los Angeles. I did not receive even $1 of Section 8 housing assistance payment, despite the promise that I'll get this before June 2nd, at least for June rent. It is now over 80% of my income, even after 40% drop of rent by owner. My goal is not only to solve my personal problem, but my complaint on April 1st to Los Angeles City Council regular session deals with Los Angeles housing disaster created by criminal actions of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles and its corrupted supporters. My case deals with not only my life, but also with life of many senior disabled low-income Angelinos. That's why I think that my case has also a community interest. For 13 months, without any legal aid, I fought against AGLA for non-discrimination constitutional rights of qualified, disabled, low-income senior tenants not to be evicted. For last 5 months, HASA Section 8 office tries to cancel my right for housing assistance payments.
Roman, you got to wrap it up. So
Okay,
pick your
okay.
last sentence. Pick your last sentence or two. I can't give you more than 2 minutes, then Chuck Tenen will be mad and force me to give him more than 2 minutes, so please just wrap it up.
Okay, do you have any question to me?
Well, I don't, Mr. Garcia, no, before that,
Yes, sir.
let me formally announce that we've been joined by the council president, Eric Garcetti, which means, Mr. City Attorney, we now have a quorum. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Roman, I want to thank you for coming here again. I know we've spent hours and hours and hours on this case, and I have to tell you in the strongest terms that you have to keep your next appointment with the county portability department. When the county sets up the appointment, you must be there. We've tried to do this many times with you, and I know that you've missed the appointment, but you have to sign the paperwork or you risk losing your Section 8 voucher. We've worked very closely with Supervisor Yaroslavsky's office. We've made sure that we have folks in English and Russian, but every time we set up this appointment, for some reason, you haven't been able to make it. So let us know whatever we need to do, but you have to make the appointment because I don't want you to lose your voucher. I care very much that you should get that, but it's very, very important for you to be there, okay?
Yeah.
And Sam Siegel is here, in my office. I know you've talked to him. We've set up those appointments. We've case managed your case to ensure that you won't lose it, but you have to sign that so that we can move your voucher from HACLA, which is the city, over to the county where you now have your apartment that you found, okay?
Sir, first of all, I never received date for appointment in county. Number one, I never requested.
We've arranged for transportation, everything, so let's see what we can do, but
No,
I just want to say.
I did not ask, I just asked from city, Section 8, for almost half a year.
But the new property that you have in West Hollywood is county, so we
But
have to
it-
take that.
before I
And
was-
we'll discuss
Roman,
more
Roman,
later, Roman, but we are here to help you, but make sure that you go to that appointment, okay?
I did
Ro-
not have any official
Ro-
date of appointment.
Roman, they will, Mr. Garcetti has indicated that that there has been some appointments that have been missed. Obviously, there's been some miscommunication. Mr. Garcetti will have another individual from his staff, I'm assuming, get in touch with you to set up the next appointment. They will also provide you with transportation. So I think that's about the best deal in town. So anyway, Roman, thank you. Your 2 minutes are up. We'll see you the next time. We've just been joined by Councilwoman Jan Perry. At this point in time, since we have a quorum, Madam Clerk, I want to take up, we moved on items 5 through 12 as communiques from the chair. Now that we have a quorum, I would just like, if none of the members have any objection where it relates to those items, then those items will be approved. Okay, so that now brings us to items 1 through 4. And I think we can lump at least 3 of these together. And that would be Mr. Sales, which is, well, I think I should let you do your job, shouldn't I? So why don't you read those items, and then what we will do, we will lump them together and deal with the 3 commissioners at one time.
Okay.
So read items 1 through 3.
Item 1 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. Thomas Sales to the Industrial Development Authority. Keep going. Item 2 is communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. Joseph F. Montes to the IDA. And item 3 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Christopher Lee to the IDA.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barclay. If we could have Mr. Sales, Mr. Montez, and Mr. Lee come forward, or are they all here?
Yes.
Hey, looks like the gang's all here. So to my old friend Tom, it looks like you're first. We'll let you, it seems like you were just here only a few months ago.
Yep.
But we'll let you start off and, indicate, since you are a seasoned veteran now of this committee, why you want to be reappointed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's, again, a pleasure to be here. I know it's only been a very short period of time. I very much want to be appointed to the IDA. It is a wonderful organization. It helps finance critical businesses here in the city of Los Angeles, and most importantly, we're trying to create jobs here in the city, and I want to be a part of that, and would urge you to support my reappointment. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Mr. Montez.
Good morning. I would like to be reappointed because I'm actually having a really good time.
That's good enough for you.
It's a good break from investment banking, 19-hour days. So the opportunity to come down to City Hall and work with a great group of people is really inspiring for me. Having once upon a time been a city employee, I appreciate what they do. I feel that I've brought some significant deals and opportunities to the city, and I'd like to continue to do so. For all the council members that are seated here that I don't know, and for the city of Los Angeles.
Well, I love your honesty, and I'm glad that you're having a good time. It's nothing like, whistling while you work, so I'm glad that you're happy. And it shows that you do have a certain degree of intelligence because you said you used to be a city employee, so you got out, okay? So, Mr. Lee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, and the council members. It's just an honor to be here, to be able to serve the Angelenos and be a part of the growing city of Los Angeles. And hopefully that I will bring some added value to the city, and I will do all my best to meet the expectations of yours and as well as my colleagues.
Thank you. Well, colleagues, I have no questions. I don't know if anyone else. Mr. Reyes looks like.
I just want to say thank you and appreciate all the hard work you have provided the city, and we look forward to working with you.
Ms. Perry.
Just one question, and then I know Mr. Lee and Mr. Sales. I don't know you very well, but I know that you've all done a good job, and I'm glad you have the enthusiasm. I just wanted to know. Sorry, thank you. I forgot about that. Thank you. Do you have any thoughts on the city requiring bond users to hire local city residents? Do you have any thoughts on requiring bond users, those who industrial users, to require be required to hire local city residents?
I mean, for what little I know, it's my first day, so you got to give me some time to
think about it.
Okay.
Keep it in mind.
I will do.
And then we'll revisit it maybe in a month or so.
No problem. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, see, Mr. Lee is the new kid on the block. Mr. President, did you have anything?
Just for the two incumbents, anything since we saw you last that you've learned, or any areas of focus you think that the city should be in order to continue some of the work you've been doing to complement that work to better package and market not just our bonding ability, but some of our wider business assistance packages? Anything that you'd tell us or that you've learned?
The only thing that comes to mind is one of the things we've been working on is trying to expand the definition of manufacturing, and we need legislative approval to do that. So whatever support we could get from your good offices would be helpful in that.
That's state legislative, the change, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And what are you trying to change it towards?
It's a very narrow, I mean, for example, some of the entertainment businesses we have, are some utility businesses, some alternative energy, the business I'm in, that's technically probably doesn't meet the definition of manufacturing. If we broaden that scope to include green businesses like mine, it would help us finance some of those businesses.
Have you approached specific legislators or anything?
Yes, we're working on that issue right now. I believe May has more of the details.
Okay, great.
It is moving, it's working its way through the state
Okay.
legislature.
Well, if we can be assistance with taking an official position on that from the city, that's quite influential usually, so we'd be happy to do so.
I'd like to second that notion because the definition of manufacturer broadly defined, you can really attract numerous types of businesses, as my colleague to the left stated, and I think it's very important because we want to attract a lot of business, both in the entertainment and other industries, and so if it's broadly defined, the city gets to benefit from federal bonds, state bonds, and local bonds, and I think it's a great idea. Let's see. I think that the Industrial Development Authority is like a very lethal and secret weapon in the city's quiver, and I don't think that it's utilized enough. I'm not really sure that a lot of the residents and business owners are aware of the opportunity that's with the Industrial Development Authority, and I would really encourage council members to use this to the best of your ability in your districts.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Mr. Lee can help us expand into the apparel industry as well. I think that would be a good place and a key industry, I know, for Ms. Perry and a number of us as well. So
I look forward to it.
congratulations.
We've just been joined by Council Member Tony Cardenas. With that said, if there are no more questions, then without objection, we will recommend to the full council that Mr. Sales, Montez, and Lee be confirmed in the council chambers this morning. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
The opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to, well, before we go to item number 4, Chuck Tennant has a public comment card. Chuck, come on forward.
Get any fish houses?
Good morning, Herb
Good
and
morning.
council members. A comment was made to me 2 weeks ago, and I know this is public comment, by the LAHD saying that the TOPA program wouldn't work, and I know it's coming on the thing, but, it was a statement made to me, and my ears don't lie. I read the report, and you know what? I think they made up their minds before today's committee that was postponed. And I expressed my comments and suggestions and my ideas at public comment and at committee meetings to help in moving this city forward. And I don't get paid for that. I do it because I want to. The housing department, they get paid, and they should try a lot harder to do more in moving this city forward on the issues and housing problems that affect this city and the people that live in it. And the housing gets worse, and they still cry about lack of money, and the departments and the agencies. Also, I brought up last time Bank of America's Innovative Community and Economic Development Program. $750 billion over the next 10 years. Herb, if they funded your committee and the LAHD with 2% of that, that'd be $150 million a year. You could divide that up in 50 city council districts. I contacted Vicki Tassin, Senior Vice President of Community Development, for an application and to get a representative down here. But you know what? It would be a wonderful thing, because they're looking to help home ownership, to meet the needs of developers of affordable housing in low and moderate income communities, partnerships, investing in underserviced markets and communities. That goes for all 15 council districts. Gosh, if you could take $150 million and divide it up, that's a lot of money to do something. So I started the process in looking into it. I'm going to get the data, and I'm going to have them send a representative down here to help you guys out. Thank you.
What was that percent? You said 2%?
2% would be $150 million a year. Would that help?
No, I think we make it 10.
Oh, God bless. It'd
Jeff.
be wonderful. You could divide it all up.
Thank you. Yeah, I get half. Okay. Anyway, that brings us to item 4. Ms. Barclay, if you could please read item 4.
Item 4 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Alice Harris to the Affordable Housing Commission.
I don't see her.
That's not Alice.
No, it's not. But I don't think that there's anybody on this committee that doesn't know her. And if there was ever an appropriate time that we could move forward with this recommendation, even though the individual isn't here. It's been moved by Mr. Cardenas, second by Mr. Garcetti. Then without objection, this committee will recommend Ms. Harris's appointment to the full council later today at 10. Okay, that brings us to item 13?
Yes, sir.
Please read it.
Item 13 is a CRA report and resolutions relative to the 2008-2009 proposed budget.
We have representatives here. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that you like...
Did everything go all right the other day with the doctor's appointment?
Yes, it did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you. I know you like to have brevity in presentations, so I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to give you the highlights of the budget package. Our budget this year is proposed for $726 million, which is an increase of over 8% from last year's budget. But we are exercising fiscal prudence and sacrifice in our budget. We did not request any additional positions. We took seriously our commitment to help the city through its budget crisis and have contributed in a number of ways. Let me talk about our operating budget. It only increased from $51 million to $53 million, and only because of the $2 million increase representing the COLAs that were approved, part of the council's approval of our MOUs, our 5-year MOUs that were approved this year. Our work program has increased to $535 million, which is a $25 million increase from last year. And what we are proud to show is that the amount of investment that we're getting out every year continues to grow. Last year, we got out about $100 million in investment. The previous year had been $80 million. This year, we're putting out on the street $143 million in this fiscal year. At the same time, our operating margin has been reduced. Back in fiscal year 06, 39% of our annual budget was for operating expenses. In 07, it went down to 37%, and in this fiscal year, it went down to 30%. So we're getting more out on the street, and we're spending less on administrative overhead. We're trying to get the money out in the street where it can do the most good. In terms of the land acquisition fund, which was created last year, we propose to continue it with the $16.1 million in new funding. Last year, we allocated about $23 million in the land acquisition fund. I can tick off the 9 projects: Nicky 2, Union Ice in Wilmington, the Westlake Theater, Bunker Hill Angeles Plaza, the Crenshaw Marlton Square project, the Vermont Manchester Shopping Center, project at Western and 60th, CD9 Corridors Meta Housing Project, and CD9 Corridors South Figueroa Housing projects. Altogether, as we had intended and as we expected, about 80% of the total amount of the acquisition fund ended up going to South LA as an injection of new resources into South LA in some of the most resource-challenged areas. In addition, our commitment to assisting the city in this tough budget crisis is also reflected in what we've done in this year's budget. We've entered into cooperation agreements of about $33 million with other city departments to help assist with other departments. And these range from Public Works, General Services, and Building and Safety. That's worth about $21.9 million. Public Works alone, $6.5 million. Department of Transportation, $4 million. City Planning, $460,000. And the Department of Cultural Affairs, $175,000. We're doing our part to help the city budget out. We've been funding the city's commitment to provide housing services for the homeless. I'm not going to give you all those numbers, but I can. We've acquired city surplus property that have been asked of us to the tune of $4.8 million. We also set aside this year a one-time set-aside of 8% of all of our new tax increment, about $4 million for an infrastructure investment fund, so that we can fund infrastructure that the city, because of the budget crisis, may not be able to fund. We, the CRA, will step up and fund these projects in our project areas. And of course, we've continued our commitment to the City Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well as a variety of other housing initiatives. And we've funded positions in other city departments. For example, an additional position in the City Attorney's Office, a position in the Environmental Affairs Department to maintain the Brownfields program, which was at risk. And we've funded 5 positions in Building and Safety for the PACE program, which was also at risk in this year's city's budget. We've received about $9 million in grants that we're expecting to launch in fiscal year 09. And we are on track to receive, we think, about $24 million in TOD Prop 1C money out of 3 awards. We'll know how we're doing on the infill infrastructure grants around June 25th, when the state HCD meets and makes their final awards. That's just an overview. We look forward to continue to work with you and the council members and other city departments to deliver the services and economic prosperity that our communities deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry.
I don't have any questions. I just need a number of reports back, and so I'll just read this into the record very quickly. I'd like to get a report back, detailed line item accounting of each source of funds for the land acquisition fund. Also included in that, I'd like which projects were rescinded this year from receiving land acquisition funds that caused the $1.2 million carryover. Next point is there was no labor budgeted for the Central Business District. We need to identify work program funds of about $500,000. Now, the Central Business District closes out in 2010. There are 3 active projects: Metropolis, City Court Plaza Phase 3, and South Village Project. Project area staff also processes the building permits, so I need to get a report back on that. The source of funds could be Central Business District general revenue, and this can be addressed when the carryover budget comes back to council or when the work programs for Central Industrial and City Center project areas come forward. So I'd like a report back in 90 days on the labor budget, as well as a plan for closeout of the Central Business District project area. The closeout plan should address what to do with entitled projects that have not been completed or issued certificates of completion, as well as any ongoing monitoring required by recorded covenants. For 2008-2009, the agency's contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was approximately, I think, $38.7 million, or 99.3 of this is new revenue, and the balance, 29.4, is carryover from prior years, much of which has been committed through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, NOFA, already. So I'd like a report back on how much of this funding is actual capital dollars and how much is credit. The impact of that on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and how this amount compares with prior years of CRA's allocation to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think it's reasonable to go back 5 years tops. During budget hearings, I noted there was a mention of a $12 million CRA contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund called the Workforce Innovation Fund that is limited to project areas, and I wanted to have a report back on where the CRA funds are being committed from and where it's reflected in the budget and how this factors into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And that's it.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. You know, nothing else. Just a little list. It's just a shopping list.
Maybe what we should do is, well, you've already done it, given it to the CLA's office,
got it.
who will then ensure that you get a copy of it and can properly respond to Ms. Perry's request. Are there any other, Mr. Cardenas?
Yeah. In your report, you referenced the land acquisition fund additional $16.1 million. Where did these funds come from?
It's from city general. If it's from the CRA general revenue, and this general revenue is generated from lease payments on leases on property that we own. It's from accrued interest on our deposits, and it's swept from the entire agency and put in this pool, the land acquisition fund, same as last year.
Now, this land acquisition fund, what is the emphasis of that fund? Where does the CRA anticipate those monies going, and when you break down the city by area?
It should be on resource-limited areas that don't have resources to otherwise have a robust work program, and so on their own would not be able to acquire land and jumpstart development. Those typically are in South Los Angeles, the east side. I think Laurel Canyon also has limited resources. And when I say South Los Angeles, I mean greater South Los Angeles. I mean mid-city, the nine project areas in the South Los Angeles region, CD9 corridors to some extent, the east side, and the harbor. Those are the most resource-limited project areas in the agency. But we also last year funded about $1 million or $2 million for the Westlake Theater, and that was really meant to be sort of a cash flow analysis. We needed an infusion of cash to be able to close on the Westlake Theater. We got in there, we acquired the land, and we immediately repaid it as soon as the tax increment started to flow from that area. So there may be a few transactions like that to balance our portfolio.
And then the budget reflects $2 million in operating subsidies to 3 project areas.
Right.
It appears that one of them is in the harbor and 2 in the South LA area?
Correct.
Okay. Additionally, $3 million in project subsidies, which are being provided to 11 project areas, which apparently 3 are in the harbor and 8 in South LA.
Correct.
Okay. It appears that the priorities of the CRA, for some reason, seem to be emphasizing and pushing money into downtown Los Angeles through the South LA mainly, where is the emphasis to the San Fernando Valley?
The land acquisition, okay, the operating budgets really only, the operating subsidies occur when a project area does not generate enough tax increment on its own to operate a staff. And so we have a number of those project areas for structural reasons, particularly in South LA, the way they were set up, they don't generate very much tax increment. And the agency has been subsidizing South Los Angeles operating budgets for a number of years now. That's just kind of a fact of how we work. In terms of the land acquisition fund, we've been very clear, and we spent a lot of time on this last year with the City Council, working through that this should be a fund for areas that have resource limited, limited in their resources. There's no particular desire to pour the money into one particular area, but it's saying that where we have redevelopment areas that don't generate enough money, tax increment, to have projects get off the ground, we should be funneling scarce resources there. And general revenue is a very flexible source of funding. In terms of the San Fernando Valley, we have made an enormous push in trying to staff up the San Fernando Valley to get projects out the door. And in the Pacoima Panorama City project area, for example, we finally are fully staffed. I think maybe we have one position that is just about to be filled, the Senior Housing Finance Officer. We had about 5 positions, I think, that we had open last year. They have now been filled. And our emphasis there is to try to get the resources out the door. It's a fairly robust area that needs to spend its resources wisely, and we're working very closely with your staff and with the staff of Councilmember Alarcon to allocate those resources. But there's no intent to put money into downtown at all. Downtown is doing just fine, as far as I can tell. I'm not sure what you're indicating,
But
Councilmember.
on those two items, when you break down where the emphasis is, you talk about the $2 million and $3 million. It's to satisfy what you just described, that they need more staffing and or they need assistance in order for them to perform at the level that CRA thinks they need to perform at, correct? As
To
far as
even have a staff. I mean, to even have a staff. For some of those South LA
before
areas.
this money, they didn't have any staff?
They've always received an operating subsidy. They have always received an operating subsidy because they don't have sufficient tax increment resources to support the staff. And we have tried to pare down staff in some of those project areas so that they're not staff heavy. They're trying to get their money into projects. And we have, I think, a whole chart showing how we've changed staff over the last few years.
Yeah, but I just got a presentation from your staff yesterday explaining that there is a correlation between proper and increased staffing, and as a result of that, there's been more activity with projects out on the street, which is the ultimate objective.
That's correct.
So the reason why I got the presentation yesterday, and I was thinking about it all last night, thinking, well, when you look at the emphasis that we just went through over the last 5 minutes, are you saying that the San Fernando Valley has the appropriate amount of staff, or it's just a matter of there's not enough money and you have to emphasize where you can for now, and hopefully later, if there's more resources, you'll add staff to the valley? What's going on?
Councilmember Cardenas, we haven't added staff to any of the project areas in this budget. We've not asked for any staff, mindful of the constraints in the city budget. It just seemed unseemly and not prudent given the potential threat from the state budget. There has been a proposal to take 5% of the gross tax increment out of all the redevelopment project areas, and that may just be the opening gambit. So we thought it was imprudent to add any additional staff. But in terms of the distribution of staff, last year there was an emphasis to staff up the San Fernando Valley, both the San Fernando Valley and the West Valley. And what I'm saying is that we have done that. We've put a huge emphasis in getting that recruiting done, getting those people on board. They're very strong staff, and we expect then in the next year or two the resources are going to get out onto the street because now we have the staff to be able to deliver the projects.
So basically what we're seeing is if we were to simplify all of this staffing and break it up into 2 fiscal years, in 07-08, CRA worked through addressing the staffing needs of the San Fernando Valley at CRA, and then in the 08-09 budget, you're actually budgeting appropriately for the staffing needs outside of the San Fernando Valley, so that when you combine the 2 years, in that 2-year period, that's where you are actually covering your responsibilities of staffing at the proper level throughout the city?
I guess I would state that we're not adding any staff. One is adding positions, another is the recruitment process. And we are almost complete with the recruitment process of all the positions that were added last year, and then attrition that has occurred because of retirements and people leaving the agency. But we've not asked for any additional positions. We don't think it's appropriate at this point in time. I'm not going to say to you that I couldn't use more staff, but I don't think it's appropriate at this particular time to add additional staff. We want to be fiscally prudent, given what's going on in the state.
But Cecilia, the bottom line is there's budgeted positions.
Correct.
And there's positions filled.
Correct.
And obviously, every department within the city, from the largest to the smallest, they have a certain period of time during the budget year when they actually have positions allotted to them, budgeted for them, and where X number are filled and X number need to be
Correct.
filled, and sometimes it takes time to fill them, et cetera. And unfortunately, it affects the work product when certain positions aren't filled for a while. So what I'd like from CRA is a report specifically outlining how comfortable you feel that between last year's positioning and filling up
Okay.
positions and this coming budget year, your anticipation of filling up positions, how that balances out. Again, you could always use more positions.
Correct.
I get that. I understand
right.
that. But of the 270 positions that you have, how you feel comfortable that you can maintain and be proactive throughout the city in all the project areas with the staffing you have, and why you balanced it the way you have.
Happy to do that. We feel very comfortable. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Are there any more questions? Mr. President?
Thank you very much.
In fact, Mr. President, let me jump in for
Sure.
1 second. At least the first time this occurred as I've been chair of this committee, Sweet Alice, even though you weren't here, we moved you're done. So you and Egerton can go get something to eat and wait till 10 o'clock, but everybody just felt that you should just sail through, so you can go on and get some coffee or something. Mr. President, I'm sorry.
Not at all. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations on bringing your administrative percentage down to 30%. What is that primarily a reflection? I mean, we all have COLAs and stuff. Is that primarily a reflection of the greater amount overall that's out on the street? The percentage is down in gross terms. In other words, last year to this year,
Yeah.
what were your administrative cost increases?
We're getting more money out on the street. We're basically being more efficient and getting it out more quickly. So before, the agency budget had been growing, or the positions had been growing slowly, but there hadn't been such a huge emphasis on getting the money on the street. We've developed something called a single performance metric by region and by project area. And we've set a goal of getting 30% of all available resources out the door each year. And we've been tracking that on a quarterly basis, and it has really changed the deal flow in the agency. So we've seen project managers and regional administrators really trying to get their money out the door. So I think it's a matter of business process improvements and emphasis on performance metrics as well.
And are administrative costs overall down then? I mean, I know the percentages, but
No,
that's the question, year to year?
Only $2 million because of the COLAs. It's the only increase we're asking for on administrative costs, but solely to fund the COLAs, not for any additional.
So there's no growth at all otherwise?
And the actual spending is growing slightly, but at a growth rate that's much less than the project spending.
Right.
So the administrative costs
Right.
are growing like this, and the project costs.
Are there any other administrative savings that you've been able to capture in that number? In other words, is it growing a little bit less than the COLAs, or is it basically administrative processes are still costing you roughly exactly the same? The only reason I ask this is all the departments have been asked,
Absolutely.
and obviously, as you brought up, the state situation, of which we have to be aware of, which I'll get to in a second. But is there any belt tightening at all that has helped you keep those numbers down?
And we've also done a lot of contracting out with the city, to be honest with you. We have made the strategic decision that rather than adding positions for us or increasing our operating budget, we ought to really be contracting with the city. And so all the numbers that I mentioned of the $32 million worth of contract authority is really intended to not do it out of CRA, but to do it through the city. And so it's in effect, a belt-tightening measure in terms of overhead for staff positions, but it's also trying to make a contribution to the city.
Is that stuff that was contracted out to other agencies, or that you did within?
Sometimes we did it within, sometimes we'd contract with private entities.
Right.
And a lot of these, particularly with Public Works and Building and Safety, would have been done by private entities, and we decided it made a lot more sense to try to do it through the City of Los Angeles.
Is that cheaper, or what's your
Sometimes
experience
it can be actually cheaper.
and sometimes not?
Sometimes these are services that you could not otherwise get, right? So take the PACE program, which we were asked to step up, and otherwise there would not be a PACE program, the Proactive Code Enforcement Program for the City of Los Angeles. So we were happy to say that we can take on 5 positions. Of course, it can only be done in project areas, But it works very well hand in hand with an investment strategy for commercial facade rehabilitation, housing rehabilitation, so that people aren't just sited, they also have the resources to improve their community.
In terms of the state stuff that you mentioned, what preparation is in this budget should the state come in with that cut? Are we ready, or is this going to be a big revisit, help us, and we're not sure what's happening situation?
It'll be a big revisit.
So
We
this,
haven't-
so this budget does not anticipate any state take at all?
That is correct.
And I haven't been following this closely. Do you think that is a safe expectation?
We have no way of knowing. The Elizabeth Hill, the legislative analyst for the state, has recommended a 5% gross tax increment across the board for all redevelopment agencies this year and for the next 5 years. We have not seen any support from the governor's office for that. We don't know how much support they're getting in the legislature. This is just the beginning, as I'm sure former Assembly member and Budget Chairman Cardenas would say, just the beginning of that conversation. But we certainly have, as you know, we don't spend all of our project budget in 1 year. It's really a 5-year budget. So we would have to revisit future projects if that happened. We would have to really look at out years to see how we would accommodate any kind of a hit.
Mr. Reyes and then Mr. Cardenas.
Well, first, I want to, I think it's very strategic that we are able to acquire the buildings we have, especially around Westlake. Our level of displacement there has been increasing like every month, for at least, been going up at least another year and a half, 2 years now.
Right.
With the cleaning of the park and all the investment we've made, the levels of families that have been moving on because they can't afford to be there is at a significant number. By acquiring these properties, I think we've been very strategic in how to create an anchor for those types of opportunities to create housing, as well as stimulate some commercial activity while preserving a very historical landmark. At Wilshire and Alvarado is a key location. It's a gateway into downtown. It's also the gateway down to the Wilshire corridor. So again, I applaud the CRA in that regard. I think our challenge now will be is how do we fold in all the different stakeholders and the community folks who want to participate in the decision-making as this continues to unfold. And I know the staff is gearing up to do that. I know my council office has been working hard to establish a social infrastructure for the past 7 years to even have vehicles by which we can deliver the type of insight that communities would have to offer. So I think the toughest part is still ahead of us, but I think it's a very critical and a pivotal point given the improvement of the park, access of families to the park, and I think now to get beyond just operational programs, now it's actually solidifying with real estate and capital that can continue generating these benefits. So I applaud the CRA on their efforts in that regard.
Thank you.
Mr. Cardenas.
On the 5 positions for CRA, with building and safety?
Yeah.
Is that something where building and safety documents and accumulates the number of hours that they dedicate to those project areas, or is it certain positions that are funded through that, and therefore those individuals are the ones who go out and service those project areas on behalf of their department?
There are 5 individuals that will basically be tasked with certain work in the different project areas that end up doing PACE type of programs. So those programs have not yet been identified. Some of them have, some of them have not, and we are outlining that now for the next fiscal year.
So it'll be bodies.
It's bodies.
Individual
It's bodies. We're assuming 5 bodies.
So what that, not only is that exercising the ability for one department to assist in the other legally and appropriately, but at the same time, that provides a better synergy between the 2 departments, because you have dedicated individuals who are going to be doing certain activities and interacting with CRA.
That's
okay,
correct,
good.
Mr.
Thank
Cardenas.
you.
Okay. No more questions? Then we will instruct the CAO and the CLA to report back to this committee to answer all of the questions that were raised by the other members. So with that said, thank you all for coming. Ms. Barclay, that brings us to item 14. If you could please read the item.
Item number 14 is a report from the CLA relative to implementing the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act.
Okay. Welcome.
My name is Jack Reef. I'm with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst.
Okay,
Good
let's
morning.
wait for 1 second. Give us a little silence here, because we want to hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Again, my name is Jack Reef. I'm with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. And if I may say, it's an honor to be here today. And I am here to respond to Council Motion Hahn, Rosendahl, Garcetti, Reyes, requesting that the Chief Legislative Analyst Office analyze Washington, D.C.'s TOPA program and to see how a similar program might work in Los Angeles. And additionally, the Housing Department was here to add their suggestions on how to structure the program. And this presentation will describe the program, summarize joint findings between the two offices, and provide recommendations from the CLA regarding next steps. And upon conclusion of my presentation, both offices will be here to answer any questions. And TOPA was enacted in 1980 during a housing crisis that was in part to discourage the displacement of tenants through conversion or sale of rental property. And TOPA provides tenants a right of first refusal when owners decide to sell their building, and it also provides tenants the ability to assign their rights to purchase to a third party. And this provision allows tenants to partner with developers or simply sell their rights. And to initiate the TOPA process, the law requires owners to adhere to a strict notification process that I would like to add that has been bypassed on numerous occasions through loopholes in the law. And based on numerous discussions with multiple city staff, nonprofits, and both nonprofit and for-profit developers in Washington, D.C., all in favor of the program, they advise, and our research indicates that implementation of the program has proven to be complex and confusing to everyone involved, including the city staff, developers, tenants, and owners. And independent research from our office and the Housing Department have resulted in similar conclusions. And they are that the city attorney and the planning department need to determine the proposed program's compliance with existing law. Tenants and tenant associations interested in purchasing their buildings would require substantial technical assistance to understand their rights and the purchase process. And the same tenants and organizations would require financing to help them purchase their buildings. And the city of Los Angeles had to financially commit to funding a tenant support system complete with city staff, financing the tenants, and technical assistance. And additionally, despite the fact that the benefits of TOPA have yet to be clearly defined, and it would require a financial commitment on the part of the city, and it may take away funds from other existing home ownership programs, that the CLA's office believes that due to the success of Washington, D.C.'s TOPA program and similar programs in Maryland, that further study is warranted to determine if the TOPA program is worthwhile. And therefore, at this time, the CLA recommends council request the city attorney and instruct the planning department to review the program and determine its compliance with state law. And if no obstacles are identified that would prevent a successful implementation of a TOPA-style law, and if council chooses to pursue a successful program in Los Angeles, the CLA recommends that council instruct the housing department to report on the best method to ensure and track owner compliance of the notification process, the feasibility of creating and funding an Office of Technical Assistance, including the funding requirement necessary for this office to financially assist tenants with the purchase of their building, a comparison of the cost effectiveness of this program with other low-income homeownership programs in LAHD, and recommendations to ensure the public is educated about and able to comment on creating a TOPA-style law. And that concludes my presentation, and we're here to answer questions.
Thank you. Do you guys want to just identify yourself, or?
Sure. Doug Swager with the Los Angeles Housing Department.
George Guillen,
LA Housing Department homeownership unit.
Okay, so at this time, before we, there may be questions for you. I have several cards from the public. I want to afford them the opportunity to come up and speak now. We have Gordon from, I'm going to get it right, from Councilwoman Janice Hahn's office. Please come forward. Chuck, you're next. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Wesson. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. Councilwoman Hahn is enthusiastic about the TOPA program. We feel that it could be a vehicle that could help to create home ownership in situations that may otherwise not be available by helping to bridge the gap in home pricing, giving tenants an opportunity to purchase in a situation where they're able to be part of the process and maybe minimize some of the profit that a condo conversion would normally create, and that they'd be able to get a lower price. And it might be something that for the LA Housing Department, where they have a vehicle to help fund their soft second program into home purchases that again are at a lower price point than otherwise may be available. It may also be a great vehicle to create more of a homeownership stake in a community, get more people involved in caring about their community by being stakeholders. So we're excited to help push it forward. We also know that we have some folks here from the real estate industry who have some questions and challenges about it, and we're happy to work together with them to work through some of the questions and challenges that they have about it.
Thank you. I have known Councilwoman Hahn for most of my political life, and I think she's always been enthusiastic about a lot of things. So,
That's for sure.
With that, if we could bring Chuck Tinnen. So, okay, Chuck, you're on.
I want to say Doug here is a leader like you. He can move mountains. Chuck Tinnen. To me it appears that they made up their minds before this committee meeting was postponed a couple of weeks ago because the CLA and the LAHD failed to have a report ready for discussion 2 weeks ago, or 8 months for a 3-page report. And the indication it won't work, strongly indicated in the report, no thought, no analysis, no progress in housing, no vested interest, can't see the future, blind, yet you cry for more money. And 3 years from now, housing in this city is going to be a disaster if we don't find ways and programs to minimize, reduce, and reverse the negative situation in this terrible housing crisis. After reading the CLA's report, it appears that the CLA is too worried about what happens in Washington, D.C. and not here. Move it forward. They admit that there is no thought and they did not accept the challenge. CLA failed on Janice Hahn's motion. The report tells us why it won't work, and they don't know how to structure it. The motion instructed them to come up with what needs to be done and not what you can't do, but what you can do. The CLA did a poor job in the report. He compromised Janice Hahn's request. The report's an embarrassment in what they came up with in 60 days, or I should say 8 months, or when it passed the city council. 3 pages in 8 months? What kind of leadership is that? Herb, the housing committee, please help them out and do something. The report is not acceptable. Develop a program and get some funding. Thank you.
Chuck, you should maybe stop being so diplomatic and just say exactly what's on your mind.
Well, you know what? They can do more. Doug here with my 15 seconds. Here's the guy that moves mountains
Chuck,
like you.
I got
He's
it.
a good leader.
I move little mountains. David, is it Kissinger? Yes, there he is. I was hiding in the back. Okay, we will now be comparing your diplomatic skills with those of Mr. Tinnen.
Really? Can I say the same thing? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning,
Good to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you. Council members, David Kissinger of the South Bay Association of Realtors. You know, normally we actually fall on the side of encouraging home ownership in the real estate community for a lot of the reasons that home ownership provides a foundation to a community. But in this particular case, we do have concerns about TOPA as we understand it in Washington, D.C., because of the fact that it is a mandatory program. Being a mandatory program, there are some inherent risks that are probably unmitigatable or very hard to address and certainly deserve a lot of attention to the city. And just starting with on the part of the tenants, there's a significant risk of fraud and abuse. There's significant risk of lost opportunity, of poor valuation, of if nothing else, putting some tenants in the position of having to take an ownership position in the house when that tenant may not be, in real estate terms, qualified or financially available or financially feasible to do ownership. So I think that there's a lot of risks that are there that are just, in front of the tenants that, really need to be resolved. And I think we found in D.C. that it's been very hard for them to take care of that. D.C.'s own task force has found it, again, difficult to administer. Title companies, escrow companies are confused. It's hard to value what the assignability of the tenant's rights are. Some, capital investors are walking away from it because they don't understand how to do it. And that may also bring the risk of reducing the number of units available to the city. I note also, by the way, that the task force in D.C. found that in some cases they would need to allow up to 420 days, 14 months, for the entire process to go through, which is the tenants to exercise their rights or to waive their rights. They can take up to 420 days. Now, what investor, what property owner, what purchaser, and even what single-family home purchaser is able to tolerate that kind of risk? And so, again, there's an awful lot of concerns here. If I may just close by saying, it may be a better use of the city's time to look for a non-mandatory program in a way that still enables tenants, enables HOAs to act as a buyer, as a good faith qualified buyer, and join all the rest of the buyers out there for everyone's benefit, including the tenants and the purchasers, and that's what actually get us close to fair market value of that property.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. That brings Noel Weiss.
Council members.
No, we'll hold that against you next time. Bring 7.
See, the clock's running, Herb.
Next time, bring 7 documents.
Speak faster.
I'm going to give you your time.
All right, thank you. Council members, thank you. Good morning. My name is Noel Weiss. I think that one reason why this is actually a good idea is because it challenges our way of thinking. We don't get stronger fighting the easy battles. We get stronger fighting the challenging ones. I believe in the power of ideas. I believe in the power of people, and I believe that if we look at ourselves and look at the opportunity, any obstacle that is being talked about, I think, can be turned into an opportunity. There's no question about it. Mr. Reyes, I think in his district, I've only found one. It's a HUD project that I think it's Mission Hills that is owned by tenants. It's potentially a model. What we have going forward, Herb, I think what we need to do is have the city attorney write a law so that we can basically start talking about the specifics. In between, and if you go 60 days, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to write one. The city attorney's going to write one. I will sit down with the powers that be, whether it's the brokers, who really should be for home ownership, as well as the Apartment Owners Association, convince them why it's in their interest to basically find the common ground, concentrate on that common ground, and basically move forward. All of the concerns, and because Janice asked for the reasons why it can work, not for the reasons why it cannot work. This has got to be the can-do council, not the cannot-do council. We need the 60s equivalent of a moonshot here. We got to get out of the atmosphere. Talking about all the reasons why it can't be done is not the way to go where we need to go. The era of political microachievement, it's got to end. The financing, every obstacle is not difficult, and I don't have a lot of time basically to go through it, but now that we have the marker, Herb, I will tell you in the next 60 days, if you give me that time, we will move forward tremendously, because the goal is to basically get this done within the next year. Thank you. Oh, thanks, Herb.
I owe you 12 seconds.
You owe me 12 seconds, okay. What I will do, in terms of providing, there is Right now, the other thing that I wanted to point out, I think in terms of my 12 seconds, the state now has a law, a TOPA-like law. That law, and I've given it, and I'll be happy to give that out too, but essentially that, in state law right now, there's a right of tenants of HUD projects. In all of your districts, you need to, I'm sure you have, identified those contracts are going to expire or the mortgage is bought out. State law now gives those tenants a right to purchase. It's there. It's not a unique concept even in the state of California. All we're doing, I don't care where we start, but the bottom line is there's too much fallow ground in this city, and there's too much of a mismatch between where the resources are and where they need to go. And the bottom line is we need to close that gap. We need to inspire the people. We need to empower them, and we need to bring the city together. This will do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that brings Jim Clark. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for giving me the time, and I just want to echo Mr. Weiss's commitment. Months ago he came to me and said, would you guys be open to creating some sort of program that would enable tenants to buy buildings? And I said, sure. But this particular program that we have in front of us, obviously the whole mandatory part of it and time allocations and the expense, we don't think it's a good program for this city at this time. The fact that tenants have the right of first refusal and then 420 days, like Mr. Kissinger mentioned earlier, and then not just 420 days, but if the actual purchase hasn't occurred, the whole process starts over again. So it's not just 14 months, it could wind up being years. And so we don't think that's healthy for the housing market. The other thing that they didn't take into consideration, and this is something that I need to be educated on, is I don't know whether or not DC has rent control, but in the city of Los Angeles, obviously, we have rent control. And the question is would tenants be interested in this particular program when they have a very, very low rent and where a mortgage would triple or quadruple their payment? Would that be something that they would actually consider when going through this? I just want to reiterate that we're not opposed to a program in the city, and we would be willing to sit down with tenants groups, Mr. Weiss, the realtors, financial institutions, and members of our association to come up with some sort of program that might work, that's privately funded and would obviously be palatable for tenants and owners alike. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jim. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Tara, haven't seen you in a long time. Good to see you. Yes, obviously. Nice shoes.
Thank you.
They light up too.
Good morning, council members. I'm Tara Bannister. I'm the executive director of the California Apartment Association. I live and work here in Los Angeles. Now, I took the approach of looking at this program, exactly who it could help and how this could work. And so I ran some numbers, and when I realized I ran the numbers, I figured you should have it too, which is what you're about to get. You're going to get a list, 2 reports I ran from Real Facts. You've heard the housing department talk about Real Facts. It's in general large apartment buildings. It reports on rent, occupancy, sales, cost per square foot for rent, cost per square foot for purchase. So 2 of the reports you're about to see. One is the sales trends from the last 4 years of apartment buildings in general. This is Real Facts, so it's 100 units and more. How much it cost per unit and how much those rents go per unit. In general, you will see for all different types of buildings, basically 100 units and more is what Real Facts is. It would probably be about 2 or 3 times the rent the mortgage would be. So I thought that was interesting to look at, as well as then I ran a report at LA RSO sales trends, so obviously rent stabilization ordinance, figuring if a building is 30, 40 years older, there's a bigger chance it would go up for sale. To see again what the rent rate is per square foot and then what it costs to buy per square foot. So somebody like me, that I'm a renter in this city, my mortgage on my unit would probably be more than twice a month that I would have to pay right now for rent. So, having looked at the big buildings, then I decided I needed to look at the small buildings, the 4, 5, 10 unit type buildings. Maybe that's a much better deal. and it might be a better deal. So you have a 2-page from Marcus and Millichap. I just pulled it right off of their website, and to show a 4-unit complex. Now, this was a typical 4-unit complex, and I couldn't help myself if I didn't point out right now that this 4-unit complex is actually negative cash flow. So whoever buys it, it's going to be a negative cash flow building. In general, the rent rate, especially in LARSO buildings, was set by the previous owner, the person that's selling it, not the person that's buying it. So you would see that while the last person probably could afford their mortgage at these rent rates, the next one couldn't. So a tenant would then, of course, have to pay what the new market is for the building. I am out of time, but the reports you now have.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, that's the last card from the public. Now, it would appear to me that we have a need in this city, and we should be as creative as we can as we move forward. The one thing, Neil, I disagree with what you said. I think that studying why things have failed, why things are difficult, can be invaluable information as you move forward trying to creatively come up with something that might work in this city. So I am optimistic that there will be some continued discussions, that I think you use what could be invaluable information from the DC area, and you see if there's a way to craft something that works for the city of Los Angeles, because at the end of the day, for us, it's all about trying to help residents realize their dream of some form of home ownership. So that I have no questions. I just wanted to say that. Mr. Cardenas?
When it comes to Washington, D.C., how long did you say they have had this in effect?
Since 1980.
Since 1980, and it's gone through a couple of revisions?
It's been amended a few times. Mr. Weiss passed out some information today that said that the original program started in 1977. It's in the information. I haven't really been able to look through it, but I believe it was amended 3 times.
Okay. What's the ratio? Were you able to gather the information of the ratio of the number of transactions that would apply to this that ended up going to sale and purchase transactions without tenants exercising, and the ratio of the number of transactions that actually occurred where they're actually using the TOPA?
No, we mentioned in the report that we haven't been able to find any kind of ratios or any statistics of any kind.
Well, see, that's the problem that I have with government, that is supposed to be open, and records in Washington, D.C., this is not Timbuktu, Idaho, where you can't get things online. For example, what my emphasis is, try to find Timbuktu, Idaho, and if you can't find it, that's probably because it doesn't exist. But my point is, in D.C., as in Los Angeles, all of this information is literally at your fingertips now. You can get this stuff online. I'm sure in D.C., they're likely to be as sophisticated and as accessible as the county assessor's records here in Los Angeles, when you can find out when the last transaction was, who owns the property, how much they purchased it for, how much taxes they pay, how many units it has, how big the lot is, all that information is there. So my point is, I'm disappointed that we have some information, and basically what I received from this report is something in Washington, D.C. exists. Policymakers in the city of Los Angeles, through the leadership of Councilmember Hahn, have said, let's look into that. Let's see if we can apply this to Los Angeles. But what we have is, in my opinion, maybe 2 to 10% of the necessary information for us to make an intelligent decision as to what kind of policy we should implement in Los Angeles. So the thing that concerns me is, I don't want to participate in a victory dance about us emulating or creating our own TOPA in Los Angeles, when in reality we hide our facts 18 months later, 18 years later, and realize that we don't want to talk about how successful it was or not, because it really wasn't. Because when you have 100 transactions a year that potentially could apply to, that TOPA could apply to, and you really only have maybe one or half of one that is successful in exercising those tenants' rights of first right of refusal, that's not something that is worthwhile. I can bet you if you look back, you probably spent a lot more time and energy of the taxpayer dollars to try to administer something that didn't even work. I mean, didn't we just get rid of something recently, Mr. Chairman, that was in existence for many, many, many years, and we realized that maybe half or one transaction, if any, ever occurred, and finally we disposed of it? But there was a victory dance back then by some council member who moved that motion, and perhaps the council that applauded it, or maybe even the public, which is worse, who got fooled into thinking that the government actually did something proactive that was going to assist them. So I don't think this report is worth acting on, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, because it is very thin, and there is a lot of information that we should have to go on from Washington, D.C., but it's just not here. Are they not cooperating with us? Did we contact somebody in their departments in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, I contacted numerous departments, and they just didn't have the information. There's an office of the tenant advocate that I had talked to the chief tenant advocate, and she did not have...
The organization TENAC, T-E-N-A-C?
That is a nonprofit. It's the OTA, Office of Tenant Advocacy.
Okay.
And she did not have the information. That, as I said, the OTA was started in 2005. They were aware they didn't have the information. I talked to other district staff and multiple developers or nonprofits, and nobody had any statistics of any kind relating to it. There was a few facts that came out that there was, in the early part of this decade, they were calling the heyday of TOPA, and there was one day where they had 50 filings, and that was notifications. That doesn't mean that they went to...
And notifications and actual transactions.
Right, two different things.
Two different things.
Right. But as far as the statistic on how many times it's occurred, we did not do what you had suggested about going to the records. Again, in Mr. Weiss's materials that he passed out today, there was some information that looked like the Washington Post had gotten some figures saying that it was at least this many transactions, and it was in the 20s, 30s, or 40s per year. But the general feeling is that it was more than, between, say, this decade, it was definitely be more than 50, maybe a few hundred. It was hard to put a number on it.
Units or
the transactions but I mean, I can't.
Yeah, but a transaction could mean a unit.
Well, I mean,
because according to what I understand about TOPA, the way it's handled in Washington, D.C., you can have a transaction of an individual unit within a 100-unit complex, and that is considered a transaction. But it doesn't mean that the other 99 units actually converted into the hands of a former tenant, and another thing that I, as a former real estate broker, I find kind of awkward is that somebody would have first right of refusal and to be able to sell those rights. Is TOPA in Washington, D.C. that you can only sell those rights to another tenant of Washington, D.C., or you can sell them to some investor who says they want to buy it? And how is that helping tenants of Washington, D.C.? You're just transferring it from one potential buyer who might be a developer to another potential buyer who's a developer who decides to get involved in this sophisticated game.
What happens is the tenants have the ability to assign their rights to whomever for
that's my point,
for whatever
to whomever
for whatever amount of monetary value they feel
they could actually sell it. I would imagine they have the right to sell it because and the fact that they could sell it means that we're creating something that's artificial here. What I mean by creating something that's artificial, you have a tenant, say they're paying $800 a month. They're in a building of 100 units. Then all of a sudden that person gives them the first right of refusal to sell. All 100 tenants get that notice. One tenant says, I'm not interested in buying it, but I'm interested in selling my rights. Somebody says, I'll buy those rights for $10,000. I'll put $10,000 in your pocket if and when I actually close the transaction, right? That's an artificial situation. How's that helping tenants for Washington, D.C.? How would that help tenants for the city of Los Angeles?
Well, I believe the program was designed to provide this opportunity for tenants to purchase if they want, and if they don't want, then maybe the law is not for them.
No, the law is for them because they hold on to a ticket, and that ticket allows them to sell their right to that unit. You get what I'm saying?
Council member, I agree with you that tenants do have the right to opt out of TOPA, and our research did find that out, that theoretically, you can have a unit, 100 units, and the 100 tenants may not ultimately obtain homeownership in those units, because as you're indicating...
Or any hybrid thereof. 1, 2, 5, 10 tenants out of 100 might exercise
Exactly,
their
but
right.
in all fairness, they too can achieve homeownership in that unit too. So you can have it both. You can have it both ways, where they can actually obtain homeownership, or all of them, or partial may not. But also wanted to comment on Jack's research, and we also we actually started months ago, and we did independently, and also we met several times, Jack and the homeownership unit staff. But we agree with staff that it was exceedingly difficult to obtain the data from Washington D.C. We both ultimately got a hold of staff members, once they ultimately decided to answer our phone calls, but to this date, they have not provided us with those numbers in terms of, we had the same questions in providing this report in terms of relative, what's the percentage of success of the TOPA program relative to what numbers go through the program?
Well, the fact of the matter is, you're making my point.
Yes.
My point is, we are nowhere even close to understanding why would we even do this, and whether or not there's a formula that would actually create the kind of success based on the objectives we may have as the City of Los Angeles. We're basically at zero here. We don't have information from a city, a sophisticated city that actually has had this in place close to 30 years. Even if they did modify it a few times or what have you, a city that has something as important as this for even 10 years, there should be information that we could gather and extrapolate what success means or doesn't mean, or what might work or not work, and how we would design that for our own city.
Yeah, I'll be there too.
So maybe now that Washington, D.C. isn't cooperating with us, with our staff in the City of Los Angeles, maybe if we're going to pursue this idea in any fashion, we're going to have to figure out another way to come up with answers as to how to design such a policy. And I'm not even going to get into it, because we have to go to council soon, but I didn't even touch on the fact that the report does talk about it would cost money for the city to administer it. Therefore, where would we get that money? And then secondly, whether or not what kind of what the state constitution has to say about it, and state statute, et cetera, as to what our confines of how we could create and design such a TOPA for Los Angeles, which is within the state of California, not in Washington, D.C. So we actually have different rules that we have to go by in this city that might not even apply to what they're doing in D.C. I'm done.
Okay. I will, did you want to say
Just
something?
real brief, because I know we have to get downstairs as well. I've looked at TOPA, I've visited DC, I've talked to some of those officials, I've met with Tenacity, and some other folks over the years, and I know I've requested some of these more in-depth analyses in this committee for the last 4 or 5 years. To me, moving forward and finding out, asking the planning department to review the TOPA program and report with some legal analysis from the city attorney's office is prudent. It gives us more chance to know more information. I think that's very important. There's a lot of complexity to the Washington, D.C. law. When I was in D.C. in February, I think the Washington Post had a long article about the lag time, and how it could be shorter, and it wouldn't necessarily hurt tenants, but it would give some more predictability to the market. So there's a bunch of stuff that's kind of incomplete in my mind here, but I think that would be okay to be moving forward with that. At the same time, we try to get some better statistics on this. The fact of the matter is, right now, the best design program that we have isn't going to result in a lot of financing for the next few years because of the place the market's in. So we have plenty of time to actually figure this out and not to hurry. If this was a year ago, I think we had some real opportunities, but it's not anymore. So,
thank you,
Mr.
President. And so I think we will adopt the CLA's report. You guys will then come back to us, and I can't remember what it is, 90 days or 120 days. Since I think I could say this with certainty, I'm not going to ever run for president of the United States. So I'm not going to doubt that our staff didn't go and try to get all the information that they could. I do question the DC staff, their lack of desire to assist you. So with that said, I think that you need to meet with individuals on both sides and see what California, what Los Angeles can craft that might work. Give another go at DC and see if you can get some information, and then we'll meet again and have another discussion. So, Ms. Barclay, is there any more business before this committee?
No, sir.
This committee's adjourned.
Yeah, exactly. On the street.